from NelsonHall.
So I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about one of our most recent key vendor assessments, and this one is of Xerox Services, which we published at the end of August, right at the end of August in fact. Now it's 3 years after Xerox acquisition of ACS, and I think in many respects that acquisition's been handled very well. Top line growth has continued. It's a mixture of organic and inorganic top line growth. 2012 revenues were up 6.4% to 11.5 billion. There has not been an exodus of ACS senior management, and many of them are still in place. Customer satisfaction was not impacted that we were aware of in the post-transition phase. And the pipeline remains strong. In fact, at the end of H1 this year, it was up just over 10% year on year. And we're beginning to see evidence of Xerox applying some technology into the services business, for example, in the application of camera technology. And interestingly, the services business, the former ACS essentially, has been able to make the kind of acquisition that it would have liked to have made, but may not have been able to afford to, prior to being acquired by Xerox. Now, why Xerox is betting its future on services? It's always been very clear about this. Services, ITO and BPO, are growth businesses, whereas the legacy Xerox technology business is essentially in slow decline. Most of the Xerox services business is actually bringing in recurring revenues. Management claims it's over 90% of its business is recurring revenues. And potentially, Xerox Services is a higher margin business. 10 to 12% is the target margin range for EBIT, compared with 9% to 11% for Xerox Technology. Now, for the first 2 to 3 years, the priority very clearly was on achieving top-line growth. And the ambition is for Xerox Services to progress from over 50% of revenues, as it is currently, to about 67% within the next few years. Now, as well as revenue growth, the ambition, of course, is to move to higher margin types of business. And priority areas for investment at the moment with Xerox include healthcare, both payer and provider. Now, Xerox Services is one of the few vendors globally that has capabilities and long experience in all segments of the healthcare market: payers, government health plans, commercial health plans, healthcare providers, and even employers through HR services. The priority investments, as we've said, as well as healthcare, include CMS. Now, we can always tell where the priorities are because ACS historically was an acquisitive company. And if we look at acquisitions that have been taking place in the last 3 years, there have been some fairly significant investments for acquisition in HR and in CMS. More recently, the move has been a slight shift towards more niche acquisitions, and the most recent of these has been with Customer Value Group earlier on this year, and also in managed print services. Now, at the beginning of the year or last year, Xerox made it clear that it earmarked $500 million for acquisition mostly in its services business. And to date, actually, the activity has been really quite small scale. So we're still waiting to see where the bulk of that acquisition will occur. And my betting is very clearly it's going to be somewhere around that healthcare segment. So revenue growth is strong. It's in high single digits. The pipeline's looking good, but the problem at Xerox at the moment, and has been for a few years now, is margin. Operating margins have been declining now since 2010, and it clearly sorting out profitability is top of the agenda for management. What's causing the margin decline? Well, there are a number of factors, but one of the factors that's been commented upon for about 2 years now is contract ramp-ups in IT outsourcing deals. Now, Xerox Services was claiming this was an issue really from 2011 from Q1. But when you look at small contracts, the ramp-up period is about 4 to 5 months. Really, it shouldn't be more than 18 months, but this was still being given as a factor for margin dilution for right through to this year. Other factors that have caused the margin decline was the loss of some higher margin ITO contracts 2 years ago, and simply productivity gains have not been strong enough to counteract the typical price erosion you find within contracts of 3 to 5% a year. So what's Xerox doing now to sort out the margin? First and foremost, it's doing a major restructuring exercise with some headcount rationalisation particularly in the US and in Europe. The ambition is to reduce the proportion of total headcount in these mature onshore geographies from about 70% down to about 65% this year. Now, this may not seem a major offshore push, but in fact one has to remember that a lot of Xerox's business is in the public sector. Other initiatives include the application of increased application of automation to improve productivity, and also increased usage of work-at-home agents in the contact centre business. So I believe the ambition is to increase that proportion to about 25% of the agent workforce. So what should we be expecting to see coming out of Xerox Services in the next 6 to 12 months? Well, the ambition continues to move away from US and now European centricity so that it becomes more of a global service provider. And a part of that ambition includes continuing to develop the industry-specific flavour to some of the horizontal areas of BPO. We should expect to see acquisition. I would expect to see acquisition in healthcare and possibly in financial services for industry-specific BPO. We should expect to see a smaller workforce in the US and in Europe, and we should expect to see growth in customer care or any front office with an industry-specific flavour behind it, which boosted really by recent acquisitions in Europe. And we should also expect to see some larger acquisitions that will boost the geographic footprint and will boost the industry-specific capabilities.